Welcome to the Friends of Fantasy Benefits Baseball Podcast. I am Justin Mason, joined by Eric Samulski of Rotoballer.com. Eric, welcome to the show.
Justin, thanks for having me, man.
Hey, it's an absolute pleasure. Got to talk to you at Potapalooza and thought we need to do this again, right?
Yeah, why not? Well, as much as you need me, I'll be here.
Awesome. Let everybody know where you can reach on social media and then talk about what you do over at Rotoballer.
Yeah, so you can reach me on Twitter at Samski NYC. Rotoballer, I do a weekly catchers streamer article every Sunday morning. So I was a former catcher, so I'm trying to bring the love back to the catcher position. I'm tired of all the, comparing catchers to kickers in fantasy sports. And then I've been doing a lot of pitch mix breakdowns. So I started looking at pitchers with new pitches in spring training and getting some video on it to see if it, should impact our valuation of them. And then that turned into, I do deep dive video breakdowns on Twitter, put a couple out every week, some long ones like 3 minutes, some like 60-second, try to mix in some video with the analytics as well.
That's
amazing. You can see all of that all of that stuff's available on Twitter.
That's amazing stuff. Definitely follow Eric on Twitter. One of my favorite kind of new faces in the industry that I'm just getting to know now. Where were you? I should have gotten to know you sooner. That's my bad, but I appreciate you coming on the pod and sharing some knowledge. And we're going to talk about kind of some news, and then we're going to get into some of the top FAAB pickups of the week in the RotoWire Online Championship draft or leagues, and kind of talk about some of the guys there. The first kind of big item on the news docket is Byron Buxton is dealing with an injury. Shocker, I know. It's actually kind of a bummer because he's just been so good. It's patellar tendonitis, which for those who don't know, that is patellar tendon is what covers up your kneecap and attaches it to your shin bone. I know this because I've torn my patellar tendon before. So, and it is not fun. How worried are you about Byron Buxton now?
This doesn't change anything for me. I mean, Baldelli came out this morning and said he's been dealing with it all year, and clearly it hasn't impacted his performance all year. So what you're looking at is basically they're going to have to manage his games when his knee isn't feeling great, and you bought into that in his price. I mean, where Buxton was priced in drafts, he's an injury risk. So I don't think this changes anything for me. It just might mean that you don't know when that rest day is going to come. It's not going to be when he's on the IL. It might be he needs Wednesday off. But, that's a headache I'm willing to bear with if he's playing like he's playing right now.
Yeah, I mean, in weekly leagues, you're just kind of setting it and forgetting it, right? If he gets the Wednesday day off or whatever, it is what it is. In daily leagues, you're just going to need to be much more vigilant, because he probably will get a few extra days off. But I mean, with the way he's hitting, he's already outperforming what you paid for him.
Exactly.
So you can't really complain too much. Hopefully this doesn't impact him, performance-wise. But like you said, if he has actually been dealing with it all year, it hasn't so far. So I wouldn't be too worried about it.
Yeah, and I'd keep an eye, as the season goes on, if you're seeing that the rest days start to get a little bit more frequent, or maybe, he's starting to run a little bit less, just some signs that maybe the knee is starting to bother him. Then if you're in a trading league, maybe that's the time to look, to make a deal before it becomes a big public thing. But I wouldn't be looking to do that right now.
If someone is in your league, in a trading league, and they're freaking out, would you try to kind of undercut like right now and buy a little bit low?
Yeah, I would. I mean, listen, I think, this is a guy who hurt his teeth eating steak in the offseason. So I think that, everybody's like, the second you say Byron Buxton, the first thought somebody has is, oh, he's injured. So I think that there are definitely going to be people that are overreacting to this because they're just like, and, we all have those players on our fantasy teams where we're just like, I don't want the headache. And maybe Buxton is that guy for somebody in your league where he's like, I just don't want to deal with it. And if you can make a little buy low offer, why not? Why not explore that?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think all of my shares of Buxton are in non-trading leagues. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think maybe in my trading leagues, I'll send a little floater out. Though I'm sure most of them are probably watching this, so that's probably not going to work out real well for me. But I mean, like you said, like you knew that there was injury risk with Buxton when you paid the price you paid for him. And so if you were okay taking it at the beginning of the season, now that he's producing like this, you can't really sell him. You've got to kind of just ride it and just hope that this doesn't flare into anything bigger. Tendonitis, it's a nagging thing, but it's not necessarily like, I don't think it, and I'm no doctor. I have not stayed at Holiday Inn Express. I don't don't pretend to be a medical expert, but my understanding of it, having dealt with tendonitis myself, is that it's not like he's at greater risk of tearing it or anything like that because of this. So,
right. And look, if maybe the downside is that you don't get the speed that you were hoping for in the beginning. I mean, if that's coming at a trade-off of, more power. I mean, the dude's hitting 382 with 6 home runs already this year. So if you don't get 20, 25 steals, but you get that kind of, production otherwise, I still think it's a net win based on where you drafted him.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you're still going to get double-digit stolen bases as long as he stays healthy. So I think you'll be fine. Moving right along, Mike Yastrzemski, he's dealing with an oblique injury. They think it's going to take about 5 to 6 days. It's a minor injury. And so they're hoping that they won't have to put him on the IL. In some ways, that sounds good, but oblique never is good, right? That scares the crap out of me. He's looked really, really good, especially lately. Hit a bomb into McCovey Cove the other day. How worried are you on Yastrzemski right now?
The oblique things always worry me. Like you said, I think the good news for us right now, if you're in a weekly league, if you have a one FAAB a week league, is you've got all week to see what they're going to do, right? Because they're going to have to make a decision here by tomorrow, the next day, and see if they're going to put him on the IL or not, or you're going to know if it's trending in that direction. I would bank on an IL stint, and that's only because A, it's early in the season, B, oblique injuries tend to linger, C, he's hitting 215 through his first 22 games, and maybe they just use it as a reset button for him. Be able to, shut him down for a little bit, make sure he's healed up, and then can come back. So yeah, it worries me a little bit.
Yeah, it worries me a little bit too, just because he's a guy that, he's a little bit older, and these are one of these things, I think people are like, oh, he's new on the scene. Well, he's like 30. So, he's a little bit older. And these are the type of things that, like, they start off small, and then all of a sudden he takes a practice swing, trying to ramp back up, and he re-injures it, and now he's out for a month. Typically, oblique injuries cost people anywhere from a month to 2 months. I mean, I'd love to say that he's going to be back, but he's no way he was going to be in my lineups this week after this news came out. And I hope people benched him. He has been hitting better. In the last 2 weeks, he's hitting 277 with 3 home runs. And 2 of those 3 home runs came in his last 3 games. So hopefully this doesn't derail him too much, but definitely make sure he's out of your lineups at the very least.
I did see, looking him up to see how the extent of the injury. I saw that the other Giants news was that Tyler Beatty's throwing live BP right now, and I remember back when everybody was super excited about him. Just something to think about.
Yeah, well, I mean, now that he's technically on the major league IL, he's allowed to smoke weed, so that's always a good thing. I hope. Tyler Beatty was a fun pitcher to watch when he was healthy. So, and then Johnny Cueto also is expected to be back May 9th. So if anybody's stashing him,
I know that's your team, right? They're pretty fun to watch. Actually, they've got some fight in them.
They do, and I mean, the one nice thing about the Giants is they're not very good necessarily from like a straight skills perspective or talent perspective, but they're super deep. Like they've got just a lot of guys, and that's one of the things with Yastrzemski that like they can afford to put him on the IL and just let Darren Ruff or Alex Dickerson, Austin Slater kind of handle the outfield. So it wouldn't be surprising to me if they do send him on the IL. But it's been fun. Like at least last I checked, they were in second place in the division. That won't last very long because the Padres are too good. But they might compete for a wild card, which would be insane.
I mean, it's a well-run organization. They get the most out of those guys consistently. And just to your point, I would say if you're a Yastrzemski owner and you see him on the DL, I wouldn't freak. I mean, or sorry, the IL now. I mean, I think that might actually be better for him in the long run, right? Just make sure he's 100% healthy and don't push it.
There's no reason for them to mess with him. Just let him get healthy. I agree. I would rather actually, as a fan, because I don't have Yastrzemski really. I don't think on any teams. But as a fan, I'd like to see them just shut him down for 10 days and then let him kind of just come back and be okay. On the brighter news, Rhys Hoskins has just been on an absolute tear. Hit 2 home runs tonight. This is one like I didn't even have the show notes, and you mentioned it. I was like, we got to talk about this. He's got 5 home runs in his last 4 games, including 2 tonight. He's got 6 home runs in his last 7 games, I believe. I mean, is this a new Rhys Hoskins or just a hot streak?
Maybe a little bit of both. I mean, I wouldn't say new as much as a little bit of a bounce back. I mean, I was in on Rhys Hoskins coming into the year, hoping that we'd get something, a little bit close to what we had seen kind of in 2018, 2019. The Phillies started messing with his swing a little bit. He spoke very, very publicly about his swing being changed and wanting to kind of get back to the way that he was hitting before. And look, if you take the exit velocity on just fly balls and line drives, he's 19th in the league right now. I mean, he's crushing barrels. The one thing I did think was unique when I looked and I was like, okay, is this for real? He has a 4.5% walk rate right now. And he's been a career 15% walk rate guy. His O swing is up from 27% to basically 35%. It doesn't hurt you when you're hitting the ball as hard as he's hitting, but that might be something that we'll see if it levels out back to norm, or maybe that starts to catch up with him a little bit and he gets a little more swing and miss in his game.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a guy that I think people think of him as a high strikeout guy because he's not necessarily a high average guy, but he's really not. He's been kind of near like 20 to 25% all throughout his career. This year, it's already at 35%. And like you said, he's swinging outside of the zone. He's swinging more. He's being much more aggressive. And maybe it's just a matter of he feels like he's seeing the ball well or he's swinging well, and so he's going to be more aggressive right now, and that changes. For those of you who drafted him in on base percentage leagues, you probably aren't super happy about this new aggressive approach. So it's something to kind of just, I don't necessarily know there's anything actual here. I'm not like saying he's going to, end up with a 35% strikeout rate at the end of the season necessarily or anything like that, but something to kind of monitor a little bit with Hoskins. I was very afraid when he was coming back from injury, and then he really struggled in spring. And so I kind of stayed away from him in draft season, but I think he could end up being quite a valuable player considering where people were getting him, not knowing when he was going to be back.
Yeah, and I think the key thing with the strike rate and the swing rate right now is like when he's crushing the ball like he is, you don't care. When he starts to go on a little bit of a cold spell, that's when you should look at the O swing numbers and the walk percentage numbers. And if he's not hitting the ball well and is still chasing a lot of things, then that tells you it's not just, he's feeling it and he's swinging at a bunch of stuff. It's actually his approach at the plate is maybe way more aggressive than it has been in the past, and it's catching up to him. If he goes on a cold streak and he starts to then dial it back, then okay, this was a guy that basically was just seeing, beach balls up there and was swinging at whatever was near him.
Yeah. And I mean, we're still at a point where stats change very drastically, right? Over the course of a week, over the course of a couple of weeks. So like, I don't want to look at stat lines, especially percentage stat lines, and be like, oh no, this is, I should start freaking out on Rhys Hoskins or start freaking out on, or start pumping my chest like, look at the home run fly ball rate for Cedric Mullins. I knew he was going to be amazing, or anything like that. But it's just something you want to kind of monitor as things go on. I was telling Paul Sporer, co-host on Sleeper and the Bus the other day, I was like, in Tout Wars, coming into last week, so a little over a week ago, I was in second place in that league. I was like, my team's doing great. And then the week ends and I'm in 15th. And I'm like, okay, just a reminder to myself, like things are just going to change drastically.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I was talking to some guys that are in a couple home leagues with me, and also Sammy Ackley, my co-host for Catcher's Corner, the podcast that I do, and I constantly am saying to him, like, how many games has it been? How many games has it been? Because I think last year we inadvertently programmed ourselves to be like, I need to know now because I don't have the time, and I need to make a split decision now. And I think it's okay to look at these percentages just as something that's in the back of your mind. It's valuable to notice something that is different, to monitor it as it continues on to see if it remains different or goes back to being normal. We don't have to freak out, when it's not even May yet and start making crazy moves.
I think for me, 2020 taught me to be more aggressive in my style of play, right? I don't want to necessarily wait, 2 or 3 months into a season before I make a final decision on a player that is struggling or might break out, because I'm going to be too late one way or the other. So I think 2020 was really beneficial for me because I've been sometimes maybe too patient of a player, but I also don't want to react with the same level of urgency that I did in 2020. So it's just kind of taking what works for you, but leaving the rest.
Yeah. And I think it's aggressive with the things that you believe in. Right? Like,
yep.
The thing, if you have a conviction in a guy and you have an opportunity to make a move for him, or you need to, going to pick him up on the wire, make your move. Right? I mean, like, some play for high stakes, but it's still a game, and we want to make sure we're going after the guys that we want on our team and we can root for. I wouldn't be over aggressive if you're not convinced. If you're not convinced and you're looking at a metric, on April 26th, and you're like, oh, I'm not sure, but the O swing tells me I should. We don't know. Don't need to go crazy there. But, if it's Cedric Mullins and we know you love Cedric Mullins, then you go get him. It doesn't matter what the numbers are.
I've already got him. I got him everywhere I could.
Right. And you bank all his home runs.
Yeah, exactly. He's a monster. Last piece of news that we'll cover, kind of a slow news time right now, but Alex Colomé gives up, I think it was a 2-run shot to blow the game for the Twins against the Indians. He's been a complete disaster. Is this the end of Alex Colomé as closer, you think? Like, is Taylor Rogers next man up? Like, what is going on here in Minnesota?
It's funny. I was talking to Greg Jewett about the Twins, and I asked him if he had any conviction in this, and he kind of just like laughed at me. Like, that this was just such a mess and so hard to figure out that, it's kind of anybody's guess. Listen, I've ruled out Alex Colomé in the past, and he always gets the job done. So is this the end of Alex Colomé closer? I have no idea. I think it should be for a little bit. I mean, Taylor Rogers hasn't let up a run all year. And, I know that they want to play the matchups, but to the same extent, like, Baldelli's out there saying we're playing the matchups. We want to make sure we get, the best guys in the right situation. And he left Colomé in for 40 some odd pitches the other day when things weren't going well. So it feels like they've been forcing him to happen. And it's not happening right now. And you've got a guy who, hasn't allowed a run in all of his, 8 appearances this year. And I think you got to let him be the guy for a little bit and see what happens.
Yeah, this feels like one of those situations where they move Colomé to lower leverage, and then at some point maybe Colomé gets the job back. Sure. Or I mean, Taylor Rogers could run away with it, or Hansel Robles could emerge. Who knows? But yeah, if I have Colomé right now, I'm feeling pretty scared, and I do have Colomé in a few leagues. I drafted him when he was a free agent because he was going so cheap. And I was like, oh, great, Minnesota. Oh, wait, now this is a nightmare. But, it's I think if Taylor Rogers is available in people's leagues, and I'm sure in shallower leagues he's going to be, I think he's going to be one of the hotter pickups along with Josh Daumont, who apparently is now getting saves in Kansas City.
Yeah. And I would go for Rogers over Daumont. And that also goes back to one of the things that Greg was mentioning about, the Kansas City Royals bullpen being basically told, here are your hitters, and they pick hitters for the pitchers based on the pitcher's pitch mix and who they match up better with. I think it's Rodgers' job for now. Hansel Robles, you mentioned, is worth a speculative ad. He's probably going to get a bunch of saves now because I picked him up 2 weeks ago and then dropped him almost everywhere because he got blown up a couple times. In deep leagues, I think you could, if you in deep leagues with a big enough bench, if you want to, stash Jorge Alcala on the back of your bench, 25-year-old with a big fastball, maybe there's a chance he pitches into that role. I know that people were really in on Tyler Duffy coming into the year, but he hasn't looked particularly good. And if I'm correct, his velocity is down a little bit from last year. So, maybe that's not the direction they would go in. So,
yeah, I think that's all great advice. Let's talk about some of the guys who were the most added this week in RotoWire Online Championship leagues over on NFBC. Those are 12-team leagues, and so I figure that's more applicable than maybe Main Event or TGFBI to people who are listening. Adolis Garcia, he was the most added player this week's been pretty hot. Kind of feels like it came out of nowhere. Are you buying in on this?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, he definitely feels like he came out of nowhere, and I had to look him up and be like, okay, who is he? Where did he come from? To the extent to see like what kind of prospect pedigree he had. And I know that he's been off and on lists, and I'm sure, Matt Thompson has more information on him because in 2019 for St. Louis, he hit 32 home runs and stole 14 bases. That obviously draws a lot of attention. And I think that tells you the type of raw athletic ability he has. He had a 30% K rate that year and a 4% walk rate, which also tells you what you can see is the fact that this dude is a free swinger. But you don't get that kind of power speed combination on the waivers with a pretty locked in spot in the lineup, I think. I mean, Texas, has proven in the past with guys like, Danny Santana, who are all athleticism and maybe not the best, plate discipline approach, that they'll let him go out there and they'll ride him out. So I think he's going to play a lot.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And, one of the things that Matt's never talked to me about Garcia, but one of the things Matt talked about on this podcast a few weeks ago that I never really thought about, and I wish I had, I wish someone had kind of spelled it out the way he did, is that GMs have their guys, right? And these are guys that they drafted or they brought into the organization. And Garcia seems like he's one of these guys, right? He, they brought him in, they acquired him from St. Louis. He does that stat line you talked about, the 32 home runs, 14 stolen bases back in 2019. That was in 132 games. He just absolutely mashed his way through AAA in 2019. I mean, there's a ton of swing and miss here. This could easily be a 40% strikeout rate guy when things are all said and done. I mean, in spite of the fact that he's making a lot of contact, especially in the zone for a power hitter, he's still striking out 30% of the time. So, there's going to be a real cool off period, and it could just the bottom could crater out. He could be Diane Viciedo type. Kind of guy when all things are all said and done. But I think you're right in the hot streak, right?
For sure, you're right in the hot streak. And I think, he's got the kind of strength in his hands where you saw, if you go back and watch some of the at-bats he had against Keuchel, where he's out in front of all of that soft junk, way out in front, but he's able to kind of flick his wrist and hit a line drive and, get a single, he hooked a double down the line, I think, in one of the at-bats. So he's going to swing and miss a lot, but he also has the kind of just raw strength. And if you look at his frame, I mean, he is an athletic and a physical dude. He's going to be able to, kind of get some hits that he just muscles the ball out. And I think, you keep him in your lineup until it really starts to crater a little bit. I don't see any reason to take him out right now.
Yeah. And I mean, he's one of those guys that, like you said, I think he's gonna, especially with how many struggles they're getting from some of the outfielders there in Texas. They'll probably just let him play a little bit. To your point about how strong he is, his soft contact percentage is 8.8% this year. Everything else is medium or hard. It's insane. When he makes contact, it's gonna move.
And can I tell you what stuff? I was watching his swing a little bit too, and you realize that because of his free swinging nature, and he's out in front of so many things, there's so many balls he hits where he is also barely using his lower half. Like he gets little bend in his knees. It's pretty much all just the torque from his upper body and his forearm strength. And you'll look at a swing and you'll be like, he does not use a lot of his body. Oh, he flew out to the warning track in center field. So, there's a lot of juice in that bat.
Yeah, it's been impressive, and I'm very mad at Matt for not recommending him coming into the season.
Not telling you.
Yeah, where was this for my 50-round draft and holds? Ryan Weathers is the second most picked up guy this week, coming off the back of a really nice start this week. Any interest in Ryan Weathers?
Yeah, I love Ryan Weathers. I was trying to scoop him wherever I could for two main reasons. One, there's just something about that kid when he pitches. He's so in command. He's so in control all the time. And I say that both in terms of his demeanor, but also like his control is actually really good. But there's something about the presence on the mound of a 21-year-old going against, a team like the Dodgers in his first start, and he doesn't look phased by it at all. And I think that, that's a little bit of that like old school scout mentality, but I think that has merit when you think of, the mental side of baseball. And, he's got I really like the slider. He's running the fastball up at 97 from the left side. So I think there's a really strong foundation. And then you look at, the Dinelson Lamet injury, which we kind of all knew was coming at some point. There's the report that, Mackenzie Gore has the yips down, in alternate site.
What does that even mean as a pitcher? Like,
so
I remember when John Lester had the yips, like he couldn't throw to first.
The worst thing I remember is when Rick Ankiel had the yips.
Okay, yeah.
And so listen, I don't think we should freak out anybody and say that like Mackenzie Gore is down at the alternate site throwing fastballs 80 feet up into the backstop or anything like Rick Ankiel. But what I just mean by that is I don't think his promotion is imminent.
No.
So if you're looking around, you're like, okay, so Ryan Weathers has a spot in the rotation for one of the best teams in baseball. He's not going to face the Dodgers all the time, even though they're in the same division. So he's going to get a lot of good matchups. He's going to get run support. He's got two, what I think are easy plus pitches. And then, I know that from a lot of the reports on him in the minor leagues, he had a changeup that flashed above average as well, which I haven't seen a lot this year.
Yeah, right. He hasn't thrown it yet in the majors, which is a big concern to me. My biggest issue with Weathers is he's been a two-pitch guy. And while that seems to work right now, we know from years and years of experience watching two-pitch guys try to stick in a rotation, it doesn't work long-term typically.
True. Yeah. And I think at that point, for me, I'm comfortable banking on, a little bit of the prospect pedigree that he has, and the fact that, there are repeated reports of him throughout his minor league career of having a changeup that he can throw and that flashes, at least average. And my hope is that as, he's really only made 2 starts. And the one start was he went like 3 2/3. So, he hasn't had to go deep into games consistently yet. Maybe that's why the changeup isn't being thrown as much. And he's opting for the sinker, which is, to me, like it is not an impressive pitch to me. So I'm eager to add him because I like the presence, I like the pitchability and the command, and I'm basically crossing my fingers that changeup shows up.
Yeah, so according to Baseball Savant, he has thrown it 10 times. But according to Fangraphs, he's not thrown it. So I don't remember watching his start seeing a changeup at any point. So I'm gonna lean towards Fangraphs here, even though I could be wrong. But either way, he would need to throw it. I'd like to see it, especially if it is even just an average pitch, right? It doesn't need to be an above average, but considering the slider and fastball are above average, like it just needs to be something that he can actually show 10% of the time. But until he does that, I'm going to be very skeptical. Yeah,
I think that's fair. I mean, listen, I wouldn't necessarily put him on my team and automatically throw him in my lineup regardless of who the matchup is. I think, against some of the teams, if he gets, the Rockies on the road, your Giants actually hit lefties well, so maybe not definitely the Giants, but the Diamondbacks. Like, I'm okay with him being a 2-pitch pitcher against those teams right now, but I think that his upside is significant enough that I want a guy like that on my bench to see how it works out. It's the same reason that I was, trying to pick up somebody like Luis Patino, just because I'm going to put him on my bench. I'm going to see what happens. There's upside there that is going to move him well above the streamers if it clicks.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, hopefully I'm not out there spending, 25% of my FAAB budget on the season on Ryan Weathers right now after one start.
Yeah. Patino, man, he looks so good.
So good.
I don't know. I think he's probably just going to be an opener, which is unfortunate for fantasy, but that still has value, especially if you're playing in like deeper mixed leagues, because if he can go even just 2 innings, I mean, every 5th day, it's going to be 2 damn good innings.
Right. If it was any other team, I would be way more confident in having him on my roster. And or if he was the follower.
Yep.
Right. Because then he could steal some more wins.
He could be the Ryan Yarbrough of this year. Yeah. Oh man, he just was so nasty. I do have him in some draft and hold, so I'm hoping they lengthen him out a little bit. All right. Speaking of lefties, Alex Wood, he's back. He's now had 2 very good starts. I think they were both against the Marlins. So I don't know how much we're necessarily buying into Alex Wood. It always feels a little bit like Charlie Brown trying to kick the football with him. Because I mean, he's one of those guys, when he's on the mound and he's healthy, he's usually a really damn good pitcher. We just don't know how long that's going to be for. Are you buying in and out on Alex Wood at all?
There are some things that have me intrigued. I think first of all, his, the slider has always been a pretty good pitch, or has been a pretty good pitch for him historically. I'm not really looking too much into 2020 because he was banged up and it was a short year. The slider is a pitch that he introduced, and it's been a much better pitch for him this year, and he's also up to the usage to almost 40%. So he introduced the pitch last year. It wasn't great, but again, he was hurt and it was a short year. I kind of like the sharp bite it had in that last start against the Marlins. It's now being used almost equally to his sinker. So I feel like it gives him another pretty reliable offering, which I'm more intrigued by than when he was this kind of sinker, changeup, curveball guy. I also think he is so strange to watch on the mound. And I think you can't really overstate what that does to a hitter. I mean, he pitches like he's stepping on hot flames. Like, his feet move so quickly when he turns, and then his leg is up in the air, but then his arm is also, you see these guys with the short arm circle, and his arm shoots back behind him and then immediately goes into the delivery. Everything about him is so uncomfortable to watch, and he gets a lot of terrible swings on his pitches. And I think that, listen, his teammate does it. I mean, Cueto messes around with his timing all the time and gets bad swings. So there's something to that with veteran guys just keeping hitters off their timing.
I've never heard that description, pitching like he's walking on hot flames, but it's so accurate. It's amazing. I don't understand how guys can do this, because pitching is so mechanically based, and it's so timing based, and it's getting everything right in the right motion every time. So these guys like Cueto and Wood that can throw off hitters' timing, because that's what hitters are looking for, right? I mean, you have a tenth of a second to react, to kind of figure out in your brain whether you're going to take a swing or not and be right. And so them being able to kind of mess with their own timing, mess with mechanical things that most pitchers aren't able to do is just absolutely amazing. I mean, for me, this is you ride it until the wheels fall off, right? Because it feels like it's always going to fall off with Alex Wood. He has not been able to stay healthy virtually his entire career. His velocity is at pretty much the highest it's been since, I think, 2017, which is great. Like you said, the pitches have bite. I'm going to keep rolling it, especially because he gets to pitch in San Francisco. And that's just such a great park, and it is playing like the pitcher's park it had previously, with the gate now open and fans in the stands. So I'm going to keep rolling him out there for now, and know that he's probably cut the moment he gets hurt again.
Yeah, I think if you were ever in on Alex Wood, you should be in on him now, because I think, again, super early days, but the slider is showing the ability to be a whiff pitch that he hasn't really had in a while. And listen, if you're blowing 91-mile-an-hour fastballs by Adam Duvall, who is a very good fastball hitter, then I think there are legitimate things that you are doing with your deception that is keeping hitters off the fastball. Now, if it goes deeper in the season and teams have started to see him 3-4 times and it's not fooling anybody anymore, then fine. Then you walk away. But I think you're going to get a couple more good starts before that time comes.
Absolutely. We mentioned Josh Daumont already. He was the fourth most added player this week, and it's because he seems to be moving a little bit, at least getting some saves. I don't think he's the guy. I think this is going to be a situation that just pisses everybody off all season long. Like, every time someone drops $100 of FAAB on the next closer of Kansas City, they're going to regret it, because I think we've already had 3 of these, and we're 4 weeks into the season. So right. I'm assuming you agree with me on Daumont. Great pitcher. I think he's going to have value, but maybe not the guy in Kansas City.
Totally agree. Yeah, I don't think there is a guy. I think they've been pretty clear, and all their beat writers have been pretty clear about the fact that there isn't a guy. I think Barlow and Daumont are way better as pitchers than Holland. If I was going to throw my dart on anybody, I would take one of those two guys, put him on my my roster. If I'm not getting a save, I'm likely getting solid ratios and some strikeouts out of the pen. And I've got a lot of Scott Barlow because it cost me nothing. And if he gets 8 to 10 saves by the end of the year, I didn't have to pay anything for it. And I'm getting what I need out of a bullpen arm other than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this situation could figure itself out either by injury or by trade. I mean, Kansas City, I mean, they're better than I think I gave them credit for coming into the year, but they're not competing for a World Series. I mean, it'd be very surprising to see them even compete for a wild card this year, especially in the American League where it's so stacked. So, like, they could trade Greg Holland. They could trade Barlow. They're not trading Daumont. Like, Stallmont's going to be a part of this team for a few years at least. So I think it could turn out better later on, but it's going to take a while if he's going to emerge as a guy. And he may never, like you said, they may just decide, this is how we're going to let the bullpen play out for the rest of the year. Is we're going to play matchups. We're going to figure out which guy matches up against which part of the lineup, and that's who it is.
And it sucks for us as fantasy managers. The Royals are 14-7. They're in first in the Central. So, what they're doing is working for them. Yeah. It makes sense from a baseball perspective to say, here are the hitters on this team you match up best against. You are going to face them regardless of when they come up. And, the Royals care about winning games. They don't care about how many saves each of the guys get. In fact, it helps them financially because they don't have to worry about arbitration numbers. So if it helps them win games and helps them financially, it's what the team is going to do, is the way I look at it. And I'm just not going to try to bank on a boatload of saves from any one of those guys.
I could not agree more. Austin Gombert was picked up quite a bit. I'm assuming it's because he's got a 2-start week, including tonight in San Francisco. Not going so well so far in San Francisco tonight. Last I checked, he'd given up 4 earned runs. Let's see. It is currently 9-0. How much are people going to regret streaming Austin Gombert this week?
I think a lot. I hadn't even seen that went well. That went that poorly. But I was like, oh, in DFS, it's like, get your Giants in there against the lefty. Mm-hmm. Listen, I wasn't in prior to the game, but it's easy to say that now, and everybody will be like, yeah, sure. But he had 7 walks in the first game of the year. The command of his of the slider is super iffy. I think that everybody was like, oh, well, he had 6 strikeouts and, went 6 innings against the Astros the last time out. It was in snow. And I think, cold snow games affect hitters as much as they affect pitchers.
Yeah.
I don't think he looked particularly, impressive. He's throwing 91, 92 with a fastball. He's got a big looping curve, which will be inconsistent in Coors with the altitude.
Yeah.
So he has to fall back on a slider that he doesn't have consistent command of. I think I was going to say, heading into the podcast today, you can pick your starts on the road, but maybe you can't really pick your starts on the road. Maybe you just let it sit on the wire.
I think this kind of begs a question about strategy, right? Because I think for years, I don't want to say in the past few years, I think for a long time, we've looked at as you want to identify 2-start guys. I mean, you still want to identify good pitchers in good matchups. And it's like, I think just sometimes people are like, well, oh, he's a 2-start guy, I'm going to start him this week. You can get one bad one or you can get 2 bad ones, and it really hurts you, especially if you spent FAAB trying to pick up a guy like Gombert.
Yeah, and I think, so many of us heard all the talk in the offseason about, innings are going to be scarce. So we're trying to get innings anywhere we can. And I just caution that, we talked about it earlier, that it's still so early in the year. You don't really need to be streaming aggressively this early in the year unless you've got sure things, right? And I look at, I made the mistake in, a couple leagues, like early on, I was like, all right, Dallas Keuchel had some great matchups. 12-team leagues, he was going to be a great streaming option for me because he's on a good team in the White Sox. And, I'm going to throw him against the Tigers, and I'm going to throw him against, some other teams that he had faced. I forget who it was that he had quote unquote easy matchups. He's got a 4.32 ERA. He hasn't been great. In one of the, I remember streamed him against the Indians. He let up 3 runs in 5 innings. He struck out 2. He walked 2. That's not helping you. So yeah. I think until we can identify with real confidence who the streaming options are, sometimes it's okay to just hold. And if you miss on a guy, you miss on a guy,
Because I mean, I agreed with the argument that, there were going to be so few innings this year, or the innings were going to be less predictable, and and it was going to be hard to get these bulk guys. But that's why it was important for me to prioritize guys in the draft that I thought would get me a lot of innings. Like, this is why I pushed up Lance Lynn, I pushed up Jose Barrios, and pushed up guys who I felt really comfortable about their innings totals, and downgraded the guys like Lance McCullers that I felt, or, Dinelson Lamet, Steven Strasburg, guys who I felt were less likely to give me innings because either they hadn't done it or they had injury issues. And I think some people took that as okay, I need to make up innings. But what's going to be fewer than the total amount of innings or the total amount of good innings? Right. And so that means if you add bad innings, it's going to be harder to overcome those bad innings because there's fewer innings to go around. So it's something to think about when you're doing your FAAB every week and you go, I want to stream someone right here. Just going for a 2-star guy because he's a 2-star guy is a bad process.
Yeah. I think, I would much rather look at my team in the second half of the year and see strong ratios and the need to add more, innings, Ks, stuff like that. And then I can start streaming guys because I have the innings to make up. Then, I streamed a bunch of, I streamed the wrong guys early on in the year, and now I have to manage my starts for other guys, or if I'm in an innings cap league, or that I'm just kind of like screwed because I've just taken all this hit. And I think, everybody talks about, bet on talent, not role. And we talk about that in the draft season, but then we forget that during the year. And there's no reason to forget that during the year. Bet on talent, not role. I would much rather take, again, we just talked about it before, but I'd much rather take a guy like, Luis Patino and throw him on my bench and hope that something happens than somebody like Austin Gombert because, he's in the rotation, he's going to get 2 starts. I'd rather hope for a guy that will be a legitimate guy that I can put in my rotation than, you know, take flyers on guys who I don't actually think are any good.
Yeah. My wife is chiming in saying that Dallas Keuchel has made her feel sad. Of course, she followed it up by rubbing in the fact that she has like 20 million saves already, and I have 0. So thanks for watching.
Balances it out.
Yeah, exactly. Every time she makes me feel good, she then brings me back down to where I belong. So Pavin Smith, he has been leading off a bit in Arizona. He's hitting the ball well. Are you believing in Pavin?
I got him in probably about 75% of my leagues this week. And there is, you know, it's kind of like the batter version of Ryan Weathers for me, where like there's a calmness and a comfort when he's in the box. I feel like he doesn't really take bad swings. He's got such a clear, confident approach at the plate. And I just really like the swings that he puts on the ball. So yeah, I'm in. I don't think he's overmatched at all. I think he's, you know, going to make a lot of contact. And if they're going to keep him hitting at the, you know, the front of the lineup, even if he's not a traditional leadoff hitter and he's not going to get you a bunch of stolen bases, you know, runs are a category. They matter. If a guy's hitting at the top of the lineup, he's going to score more runs. He's always been a low strikeout guy and high walk guy in the minors. He's going to get on base. So yeah, I think I'm in. I'm not expecting, you know, like some 20-25 home run first baseman type, but I think I'm going to get a guy with a pretty solid batting average who's going to score some runs and knock in some runs for me.
Yeah, I've been very impressed by him, and he was not a guy that I was really in on coming into the season. I know there were some believers out there, and they should definitely take a bow. And I think that they're going to figure out a way to keep him playing even when Christian Walker comes back, whether it's in the outfield or, you know, or just kind of bouncing him around a little bit in order to keep him playing. I think that it's gonna work out fairly well for him. I don't think he is like, I don't think he's a 30 homer bat, but I think he is a guy who's going to hit for average. I mean, he's got like a 92% zone contact percentage right now. So like when he swings and the ball's in the zone, he's making contact, and it's been fairly good contact so far. So like, I think he's probably a 25 homer bat, like a 280, you know, kind of average guy. And that has a ton of value. In today's game.
Yeah. I see that all in his profile and in his swing. Well, in part of his swing, I think for me, what was like, there's a lot of thump in the bat. You know, I think you can see it when you watch him make contact. You can also see it, like, again, if you look at exit velocity on fly balls and line drives, he's 42nd right now, basically sharing with Nick Castellanos and JD Martinez. So if your exit velocity on fly balls and line drives is around JD Martinez and Nick Castellanos, I think good. You hit the ball pretty hard. Yeah. He's barreling the ball relatively well. The thing that I would like to see, and maybe it's a change he can make as he gets, you know, more adapted to major league pitching. His pull percentage is dropped. It's only about 33%. And what I noticed when I watch him swing is that he doesn't finish his swing sometimes. So if you're watching a hitter swing, normally we see on the follow through, their hands go around by the opposite shoulder, right? Like the full momentum of the swing carries around and their hands finish opposite shoulder. Sometimes his hands finish like in front of his shoulder and above, almost like he's cutting off his swing. In order to do that, you basically have to stop the torque of your hips early so you don't open up fully. And if you don't do that, you're not getting around fully on the ball, which means you're not pulling the ball, which is why he has almost a 50% hit rate to center field. So I'd love to see that change, because there are some swings where you just see like him just react to a low end fastball, and you can see he clears his hips easily and he drives the ball to right field. But I think on the pitches down the middle, he's closing himself off a little bit, which is preventing some of that pull side power that I think is naturally in there. So maybe it's just an adjustment he needs to make as he gets more comfortable.
Oh, wow. All right. Austin Gombert update. He went an inning and 2/3, gave up 9 earned runs.
You got to buy low.
Yeah, that's Nice. Oh man. All right. Willie Calhoun, my boy. I've always loved me some Willie Calhoun. He has been one of the more picked up players. I think it's because he got dropped in a number of leagues because he started the year on the IL. UT only in some formats, so just be kind of cautious of that if you're going to pick him up, to make sure that you don't have Nelson Cruz or JD Martinez or Giancarlo Stanton or Franmil Reyes clogging up your UT spot, and then you can't really play him. But he is started off decently well. I've always liked Willie because I think I don't know if Paul coined the phrase or not, but built like a fire hydrant, and that's my kind of guy because that's kind of how I'm built. Weird profile that doesn't walk but hits for power. What are your thoughts on Willie?
I have also always been a Willie Calhoun fan, so you're gonna get a biased take from me.
Mm-hmm.
I think, again, another cliche, but like prospect growth isn't linear. He's 26. Yeah. He's not an old player, and we already talked about his teammate Adolis Garcia and the fact that like he's going to get playing time because there's not anybody else. And listen, at this point in his career, like the Rangers need to figure out if he's a guy for them or not. So I don't see any reason why they would take him out of the lineup because he's 26. They're not competing. They need to know if he's a guy that's going to be part of their rebuild or if he's a guy that's going to be, sent off somewhere else. I think, there's always been legitimate power. So, I'm a fan. I think the only thing I would keep an eye on, again, we talked early about how we're not really paying attention to percentages because it's so early in the year. His zone swing percentage is down 20%. And the only reason I'm looking at that is because after he got hit in the face, he came back a little tentative. Yeah. So that's the only thing I'm really looking at with Willie Calhoun is like, is he still aggressive in the zone? Is he still the kind of guy who will, keep his head down over the plate and go after those inside pitches? Or do we see him still with a little bit of residual effects from that fastball in the face?
Yeah, maybe because pitchers aren't throwing him into the zone as much this year so far. And because, I think his zone contact percentage is like 91%. He's a guy that maybe pitchers decide they don't want to throw it to him in the zone because he might murder it. Because he does have a ton of power. He's kind of a short, stocky guy that can't play defense anywhere. But he can just rake. And I do believe we're going to see a 30 home run season from Willie Calhoun very soon. It might actually even be this year.
Yeah, I have him a lot of places. I think if you're watching him and he's he's in the lineup and he's staying aggressive, I don't see any reason not to buy in. I think the bat is real.
I do too. And as long as they're giving him, now that Shin-Soo Choo is no longer on the team, there's no reason for them to just put him at DH and let him play. Jake Diekman, another big pickup this week. People desperate for saves. I know I'm desperate for saves in some leagues, and I did grab him in a few places. It seemed like he was going to be the guy once Rosenthal went down, and then it was Trevino, and now people are thinking it might be Diekman. Are we ever going to know who the guy is in Oakland?
It's funny because, Oakland has always been a team that's locked in on one closer, which is why I was so happy I got Trevor Rosenthal in so many places in the offseason, and I was like ecstatic because of where he was going. Outside of the top 100. And I was like, this is a guy on a team where he's just going to get a bunch of saves. And then he got hurt and they've been, playing closer roulette a little bit since then. I was in on Diekman. Then they signed Sergio Romo and I was out on Diekman because I was like, they're going to give it to Romo, then Rosenthal got hurt and I was in on Diekman, and then Trevino was the closer. But I think he's a good pitcher. He is pitching at the end of games for a team that's going to win games. He doesn't give up a lot of hard contact. He gets swings and misses. He totally changed, the shape of his slider last year, and to get more sweep across the plate. So I think even if he's not the guy, he's going to help you. So I think we need to move away from I need to find 20 saves. You're not going to find 20 saves. Are you going to find 10 saves and good ratios and maybe steal a win or two at the end of a game, that's still incredibly valuable.
Yeah, Diekman's going to end up with 13 saves, and Trevino's going to end up with probably 17 or something like that. And while you won't necessarily be happy that you didn't rack up a million saves, you're going to be happy with the end of the line, right? And this is a smarter organization, and they know how to use their players to get the most out of them, and that's what they're doing, and that's what we've been kind of seeing since kind of Rosenthal went down and the season started. Was they're going to use the guy in the correct spot, not the spot fantasy players want them to use them. And that's going to be frustrating if you're really, desperate in the category, but that's what we got.
Yeah. And I think we do this whole thing where we're saying, oh, well, saves are being spread out across the league, so I have to get more saves, which is a little bit counterintuitive, because if saves are being spread out around the league, then with the exception of your guys, Liam Hendricks and Edwin Diaz, who are the locked in definite closers, the gap between all the other guys is going to be much smaller, because you're not going to have those guys that are 20 to 25 save guys, and then another guy on his team is a 3 save guy. You're going to have guys that are 15, 10, 7. And so if I'm getting the guy that gets 10 saves instead of the guy that gets 15 saves, but I'm getting good strikeouts and better ratios, then it's actually not that much of a difference. And the reality is it's almost always impossible to get the 30 save guy on the waivers. What we wind up getting is, the guy who gets 20 saves, the type of guy who maybe doesn't exist anymore. So if you missed out on, the locked in closer one, stop trying to find one on the waivers. Just try to find a good reliever who's going to get you a handful of saves.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I think if you're not going to buy into, because some people just refuse to pay for the upper echelon guys, right? And I don't have a problem with that necessarily. I will buy the Liam Hendrickses, and I will, their Roldis Chapmans or the Josh Haders, the guys like that. I feel really that are locked into, potential 30 save season. But if I don't get one of them, if I miss out, or I'm in the situation I'm in TGFBI where I thought I got that guy in Rosenthal and now am screwed, I'm just going to kind of cast my net wide and far, right? And try to get as many of those 7 to 12 save guys as I can, and see if I can churn through, and maybe I luck into a guy who gets 20, right? Or maybe I'm just compiling in the same way that if you miss out on all the top speed options, you're just going to have to compile through your, through your offensive spots in order to kind of make up the difference in stolen bases.
And I think it goes back to, what you were saying about streaming too, right? Instead of picking up your, the Stefan Crichtons of the world who you're like, oh, maybe I'll steal saves in Arizona, just get a guy that's a good pitcher and pitching at the end of games. And then until something comes up, if it ever does, that's like a surefire 100% thing. And then if you want to go spend your money on it, go spend your money on it. But I'd rather get a guy that's pitching, that's a good pitcher, pitching at the back end of a team's games. I'll steal a couple saves. Maybe an injury makes him the guy for a little bit of time, or a trade makes him the guy, or whatever it is. And I'm not getting burned by these reliever blowups at the end of games, chasing saves on a bad team.
And this is what I wish I would have done coming into this year. Because I'll tell you, in the leagues where I'm struggling for saves, if I had taken that approach, my overall team would be in a much better situation. And TGFBI is one of those spots where when when injuries hit and I had to make decisions, I've thrown bad money at bad relievers, hoping to get a spot, and still have not gotten saves, but I've gotten my ratios torched.
Yeah. I mean, we've all done that dance, and I think people hate specking on saves, and we do it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just kind of it's like the little Seinfeld. I choose not to race. I choose not to do this dance. I'm gonna, I'll take my Scott Barlows and I'll be happy, for now, and I'll keep trying to find those guys that are pitching at the end of games, regardless of if they're getting saves or not right now.
I think it's a much better strategy than the one I'm using, or that I have used so far in TGFBI. Tyler O'Neill, coming off of a week where he had a few homers in a row, people spent some money on him. Again, I go back to the Charlie Brown trying to kick the football metaphor, because that's what it always feels like with Tyler O'Neill. You see the guns, and he's got them. But I don't think it's ever going to happen. I don't believe. Do you?
No, I mean, I want to. I want to. But I also, I guess I question what changed that we're spending all this money on him. I mean, he had 4 hits coming into that game. He went 2 for 4. He hit 2 home runs. So you're telling me that a guy who we always thought was going to have a low batting average and not make a lot of contact, but have occasional games where he hits a few home runs, had one game where he hit a couple home runs, and all of a sudden now we're like, oh, he's here. He's the same guy we thought he was. He's hitting 171. He has 3 home runs. 2 of them came in one game. He's not making consistent contact. I don't know that the lineup spot is 100% locked in safe when Harrison Bader comes back. I think they start shifting some guys around. I think we want it to happen, and it might never happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of a comp of a player that he reminds me of, and I'm having a hard time. And Cole Calhoun keeps popping into my head, only because Calhoun's defense has extended his career, and I feel like Tyler O'Neill's defense will extend his career and allow him to continue to play at the majors. But Calhoun hasn't been a guy that he doesn't have 65, 70 grade power. And he also doesn't swing at everything. I mean, absolutely everything. His zone swing percentage right now is 80%. And he's swinging outside of the zone 41% of the time. I mean, he sees the arm action from the pitcher, and he's like, all right, I know it's time to swing. And I feel like if maybe he got to a different organization, a different hitting coach could help him. But at this point, I want to believe he can do it. It's never going to happen. It's not going to happen on my team. If the breakout ever happens, I'm not going to be there for it.
And I'll miss the boat on it too. And you know what? It is what it is. Sometimes guys need fresh starts, like you were mentioning. I just think we've seen the song and dance before, and until there's something that is substantially different, not just like, oh, he had a good game, but there's something substantially different in his approach, his swing, I just can't buy into the fact that it's going to happen consistently enough for me to want to take advantage in fantasy.
Yeah, his zone contact percentage is 60.8%, and I want to say the league average is around 83%. So that tells you exactly where we're at with Tyler O'Neill. He's going to run into a few. He's a great DFS punt play when he's cheap.
Sure.
But that's about it.
And we root for guys like this. I mean, everybody wants the super athletic guy who can, crank out home runs. I remember it's why, in the 2006, 2007, I was obsessed with Willie Mopena, because I feel like all he did was hit 500-foot home runs. But, those guys aren't always consistent, and they're not always the most well-rounded baseball players.
Yeah, I completely agree. All right, let's finish out on Domingo Vermont. He was, I think, just widely dropped when he got sent down to the alt site. I think he's supposed to have a 2-start week this week, so maybe that plays into it. They are playing the Orioles. Any interest in Vermont?
Not so much for me. I think they also I think part of the bidding, if I'm not mistaken, was that he was a 2-start guy, and then they made the late announcement that Davy Garcia was going to start today, which bumped Domingo Vermont. So I don't even think he is a 2-start guy anymore. But I just don't see enough there. The curveball is good, and that is maybe it for me. So I don't see enough there that makes me excited to roster him. I don't see enough there that makes me convinced that he's going to hold off Davy Garcia for a spot in that rotation long term. Who knows when Severino's coming back? But I think there's an end date on Domingo Vermont, and I think this goes back to what you were saying before about I'd rather stream a guy who I'm confident in terms of his talent, and maybe who I also don't think is a bad person who's done terrible things off the field.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I don't care as much about people who do bad things off the field. Oh, just because I'm a bad person myself. No, but I mean, for me, I've not ever really been a Herman guy. Like, I don't see what I guess other people see in him that they think that and I know he was really, really good in spring and people are really impressive, but you also have to remember the quality of competition people are facing in spring is nothing, right? And it's clear his teammates don't even like him. So I don't know why I would. So I'm not in on Domingo Vermont. People can continue to play around with that one, but not going to be me.
No, I think he had one good short stretch, and I think it's course corrected, and I just don't see enough there.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously he could find himself as a mainstay in the rotation if any one of their arms that are always going to be hurt get hurt, but it's not a great place to pitch. It's not a good division to pitch in. And I think it could be more painful than it's even worth, even though you might get some wins. Though the Yankees look atrocious this year.
Right. And I was going to say, if you talk to a Yankee fan, they would tell you he's pitching for a terrible team. And why would you want that? Because for Yankee fans, it's the apocalypse right now.
Matt Harvey just carved him up. I mean, I mean, I don't even know what's going on. And I feel bad for my people who read my DFS work today because I was all about a Yankee stack, and I lost money too, guys. I'm sorry.
I know. I hate stacking the Yankees. We were talking about it, in the Rotoballer chat about the stacking the Yankees. The only time the Yankees are a stack, they're the highest owned stack. So you're either not going to get any leverage or they're just going to tank like they did against Matt Harvey.
I don't know why I wasn't stacking the Giants today. I should have thought better.
Yeah.
No, it is what it is. We'll be back at it tomorrow with more DFS.
Yeah, we just keep going. You run into a brick wall, you do it all over again.
Yeah, that's how I roll. Eric, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, I had a blast. Thank you for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Remind everybody where you can reach on social media, and then plug your work.
Yeah, so I'm at Samulski NYC. So you should check me out for a bunch of video deep dives, pitcher video deep dives, pitch mix stuff. That's all posted on Twitter. You can read my work on Rotoballer. I've got a history of pitch mix work there, as well as catcher streamers every Sunday morning, so that you can get that in before your FAAB. And then my podcast, Catcher's Corner, is where we just kind of look at baseball from a catcher's perspective, how we break down pitchers, hitters' weaknesses, things like that, and give you some fantasy insight with some, good old-fashioned baseball scouting reports.
That's absolutely amazing. You can reach me on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB. You can hear me on this podcast, TGFBI podcast, and of course, the Sleeper and the Bus podcast. And then you can read my work. I'm writing daily at Fangraphs, pretty much daily at Fantasy Alarm, then at Friends of Fantasy Benefits and TGFBI.com as well. For Eric and myself, thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball season.